This story occurred in the summer of 2008. I grew up in Oregon and was acquainted with the outdoors at an early age. My favorite hobby became hiking, particularly in areas that were either very dangerous or isolated. The health benefits of hiking were secondary to the thrills of walking along the edges of exposed cliffs, being in cougar and bear territory, and knowing that I was far from help. Into the Wild was released in the fall of 2007, and I immediately fell in love. Being a high school senior, I could barely go another week living in my parents' house. The movie spoke to my sense of adventure and inspired me to hike the California portion of the Pacific Crest Trail after graduation. I made it from the Mexico border to Northern California without much incident. I saw rattlesnakes and black bears and experienced dehydration. But nothing happened that made me fear for my life. Somewhere in the Lassen National Forest in northeastern California, I walked around a bend in the trail and was startled to see two people sitting on a rock, dressed in nearly all white. Their faces were dirty, their appearance disheveled, and the man had a long, unkempt beard. Both seemed to be in their 40s. They looked like the couple who kidnapped Elizabeth Smart. What struck me as odd about the encounter was seeing anybody at all. I frequently went days without seeing a single human being. Their white clothes could be explained by the need to escape the California summer sun. Their scruffy appearance could be explained by the fact that most long-distance hikers abandon personal hygiene on the trail. After I said hello, they said nothing and simply watched me as I passed. Even that I didn't find odd. I chalked it up to them being foreign and not knowing what to say. I camped a few hundred yards off the trail that night, as I always did. Following bare precautions, I hung the leftover food I'd cooked that night from a tree, approximately 5 feet off the ground. When I packed up camp in the morning, I noticed the food was gone. I immediately thought a bear had entered my campsite, so I began to look for paw prints. I didn't find any paw prints, but I did find a boot print circling the campsite. 2 pairs of them. One of those prints led right up the rope from which the food had been hanging. I thought of the couple I had passed earlier, and everything clicked. I quickly packed up and left. My mind was racing the entire day, but I figured the couple was simply hungry. If they had nefarious intentions, they would have come for more than the food. Several days passed, and my mind was at ease again. I had begun to circle my campsite with sticks to wake me in the event of an intruder, animal or otherwise. One night, I awoke in my tent to the sound of those sticks crunching. I grabbed my hunting knife. I tried to relax by telling myself that, in the middle of nowhere, the source of that noise was much more likely an animal than a person. Then I heard frantic whispering. It was impossible to tell which direction the voices were coming from. Being in the dark, surrounded by trees 100 miles from the nearest city, plays tricks on your senses. I debated yelling out, claiming to have a gun, but instead decided to be silent and retain the benefit of surprise. I heard footsteps circling my tent and was ready to slash at whatever opened it. But just like that, it was over. No more footsteps, no more whispering. I lay frozen awake in my tent until sunrise, and opened it to find nobody there. The only evidence something had actually happened was the boot prints, the same as before. Several more days passed, and I was now in the Shasta National Forest, probably 50 to 75 miles from where I first encountered the couple. The trail became more or less a goat trail. Being on the side of a mountain and above the tree line, I could see the trail winding for miles in front of and behind me. I stopped for water in the rare shade, and noticed 2 hikers miles behind me. All I could see were 2 white dots moving along the mountainside. I immediately said out loud, "This trip is over." I pulled out my map and looked for the nearest town, which appeared to be Castella, located off Interstate 5. The only problem was that it was 25 miles away. I hiked well into the night trying to gain as much ground as possible. I kept losing the trail and decided to set up camp, this time far off the trail and into the forest. I got in my tent and tried to sleep, but every little noise kept me awake. After a few hours in my tent, I heard the telltale signs of another bad night. Footsteps, whispering, and sticks breaking. Sound travels far in the absence of other sound. I knew they were close, but wasn't sure how close. All I could think was, this is messed up, this is so messed up, god damn it. Finally, a flashlight hit my tent, lit up the entire thing and went dark. I unzipped my tent and climbed out carrying my knife, yelling nonsense into the dark. It was like a cliche scene in movies where people in the wilderness hear sticks breaking around them, and the camera pans around the trees because the people have no idea which direction the sound is coming from. Then I heard footsteps running toward the tent and barely made out a figure moving in my peripheral vision. I turned and ran deep into the forest. I tripped several times and ran into several trees. After running for approximately 5 minutes, I tripped, rolled, and came to rest next to a downed tree. I got under the tree trunk and lay still. I saw the flashlight moving around in the distance. I lay under that tree for hours. I was certain they were gone, but I didn't move. Eventually, birds started chirping and I knew sunrise would come soon. Once it did, I made my way back to the trail, abandoned my campsite, and walked the rest of the distance to Castella, where the Pacific Crest Trail crosses Interstate 5. I hitchhiked my way to the town of Mount Shasta and spoke with the police and Forest Service. They put me up in a motel for the night, and my parents drove from Oregon to pick me up the next day. I followed up with the police and Forest Service months later, and they told me there had been similar reports of items disappearing from campsites throughout the surrounding national forests. However, there had been no other reports of the terrorizing that I experienced. As far as I know, nothing ever came of the couple. A few years back, my girlfriend and I, having hiked several other parts of the Appalachian Trail, decided we wanted to give the southern portion of Virginia's trail a shot. It is about 166 miles long and runs through George Washington and Jefferson National Forests, from Roanoke County to Pearisburg in Giles County. This is definitely one of the more remote and less traveled parts of the trail, which was exactly what we were looking for. We gathered our gear and made our way to the start of the Virginia Creeper Trail to begin our journey. We had planned our hike to end at Damascus, and we figured that by the time we got there, we would be more than ready to get home to our own beds. It was early October, and the changing leaves and colors were amazing. The air was crisp and cool. Perfect hiking weather with beautiful scenery. The majority of the trip was pretty uneventful. Just your typical hike. But our last couple of nights is where things got weird. On this portion of the trail, you are supposed to camp on the trail or at a designated shelter. We didn't really want to run into other people, and we didn't want anyone coming up on us in the middle of the night. We decided to ignore those suggestions and find our own little spot off the trail. After a little searching, we found a spot a short distance off the trail in the middle of a small clearing. It was perfect. We set up camp, cooked some food, and talked for a while, and then snuggled up and went to sleep for the night. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, I was awoken by my girlfriend shaking me awake, telling me, "Get your gun. Someone is outside walking around our tent." She explained that she had woken up to what sounded like someone right outside the tent, running a knife or something along the side while circling us. When hiking, I carry a 1911 pistol and a Judge revolver with me. You never know exactly who or what you might run into on a long hike in a remote location. I got the judge out of my pack and we sat silently, listening for any sounds. A few minutes passed with nothing but the breeze blowing through the trees, and then I heard it. Snap, crunch, snap. Someone or something walking in the woods behind our tent. I grabbed the flashlight and silently made my way out of the tent. Our fire had gone out, so it was nearly pitch black, illuminated only by the dim glow of the October moon. I told my girlfriend to stay put while I checked it out. I didn't turn the flashlight on right away so as not to give away my location. Instead, I waited to hear more noises. After a few minutes, snap, crunch, crack. It sounded bipedal based on the way the steps were paced. I turned on the flashlight and flooded the area with light. I thought I saw someone move behind a tree. I yelled, telling them to go away and that I was armed. I kept the light on the area with my gun drawn and slowly approached where I thought I had seen the figure. Then from my right, I heard what sounded like someone running away through the woods. I spun and aimed the light in that direction, and then from the original spot, I heard whoever it was take off into the woods. There's no way I was giving chase, so I returned to the campsite. I told my girlfriend what had happened, and I ended up sitting guard outside the tent in the darkness until daybreak. In the morning, I looked around for signs of who or whatever it had been. I discovered a boot print in some soft, moist dirt not far from our tent. It wasn't mine, and it wasn't my girlfriend's. This freaked me out, as it confirmed that someone, perhaps more than one person, had been skulking around our tent in the dark. I kept it to myself because I didn't want to scare her any more than she already was. At this point, we were pretty deep into the hike and still had 2 days left. That day, we walked a little faster than normal, covering as much ground as possible. When it came time to set up camp, I found a spot near a cliff where we could place the tent in a small overhang, preventing anyone from coming up behind us. The whole day up to this point, I had a feeling we were being followed. I had no confirmation as I hadn't seen or heard anyone else, but it was just a gut feeling. We set up camp, cooked some food, and then retreated to the tent. I gave my girlfriend the 1911, kept the judge next to me, and assured her that if I slept at all, it would be with one eye open. After a while, she drifted off to sleep and I stayed awake, listening to the sounds of the woods at night. I stayed awake for a few hours, just waiting to see if anything would happen. Eventually, my exhaustion caught up with me and I drifted off. I awoke sometime later to what sounded like someone going through our belongings outside the tent. I grabbed my gun and woke my girlfriend, shushing her to be quiet. From the faint glow of the fire, I could see a silhouette against the tent. There was really someone out there. I yelled something along the lines of, "We are armed, get out of here." They dropped what they were doing and bolted. I came out of the tent, gun drawn, ready to defend myself. Our stuff was strewn about. They had rummaged through quite a bit of it. I walked to the edge of the woods in the direction they had fled. There was a creek nearby, and along its edge ran a small trail. Down the creek, I could see a light. It looked like a lantern flickering. Then I saw 3 more emerge from the other side of the woods. I told my girlfriend to start packing up whatever she could, and that we were leaving immediately. We packed up everything of value, left the tent and a few other items, and headed back onto the trail in the middle of the night. I kept hearing people talking off in the woods and branches, snapping for quite some distance. I kept looking behind us every few seconds to make sure nobody was following. It was completely nerve-wracking. If something had happened, we were still a long way from anywhere and entirely on our own, since we hadn't seen another hiker the entire time. I genuinely felt in serious danger. We had been walking for quite some time when I heard something in the woods behind us. As we rounded a corner, I turned around and saw someone step out onto the trail and just stand there watching us. The sun was just coming up and there was barely any light. I couldn't make out any features, just the silhouette. I stopped and looked at them for a moment and asked who they were and what they wanted. They just stood silently watching us and then turned and walked back into the woods. We picked up the pace and kept going, looking back every so often. We didn't see them again, but my gut told me they were still there for quite a ways. Eventually, we reached the end of the trail and got to where we had parked my girlfriend's car, completely exhausted. We made it out of the Virginia woods without becoming a meal for a clan of cannibalistic inbred hillbillies, which is what I had imagined happening in my head the whole time. I have no idea who they were or what they wanted. Maybe it was someone just messing with us. Maybe it really was a clan of deformed hillbillies hunting us. I will never know because I will not be returning to find out. My New Year's resolution for 2012 was to get in shape again. After my first child was born, I had lost my athletic interest, but I had every intention of getting it back. I started running 4 days a week with my friend Hannah, who was a great runner and motivator. We would run after work 5 to 10 kilometers, usually favoring the forest trail. It's the kind of trail that has lights in the darker months of the year, so you can run there any time really. Once you turn on the lights, you have 45 minutes to run the shorter trails, and longer for the longer ones. Then the lights shut off automatically. We had been running for about 2 months when we started seeing the same man hanging around the parking lot every time we arrived. He was a thin man, 25 to 30 years old, always dressed in sports clothes but never actually running. He never looked anyone in the eye. We speculated that he could be homeless and camping nearby because he was constantly there. We got used to seeing him sitting somewhere close by, silently, always on his own. We felt sorry for him. He never seemed to talk to anyone or interact at all. But there was something about him that made us hesitate to talk to him or ask if he was okay. I can't pinpoint exactly what it was, but something wasn't completely right about him. One evening, Hannah didn't make it to our run and I decided to go on my own. I arrived at the parking lot, my car being the only one there. I did some stretching, turned on the lights, and set off on the 5-kilometer trail. I hadn't seen the thin, silent man when I started my run. Perhaps it was getting too cold to sit there now that it was autumn, dark, and approaching freezing temperatures. He must have been there somewhere in the shadows, because when I got to the top of the first steep hill, I could hear a heavy breathing somewhere behind me. I looked over my shoulder and saw him. He was running like a man obsessed, in regular shoes, not running shoes, with his arms moving in a really strange, stiff manner, as if he was made of metal. His hands like arrows, straight and in an upward and inward angle, sort of like a sprinter but more extreme, moving like a robot. For the first time he looked me straight in the eyes, and it was the eyes of a predatory animal. My heart froze. He had never done anything to harm me or anyone else as far as I knew, but the look in his eyes alone was enough to let me know that I was facing a serious, serious threat. I started running faster, trying to create distance between us. I could hear his heavy breathing getting even more strained. I ran like my life depended on it, adrenaline pumping through my body and giving me new strength. I tore off my necklace and threw it on the ground, thinking, I must leave a trace in case he takes me. Something must be left behind. I tried screaming, hoping someone would be close enough to hear me, but I couldn't scream my lungs out and keep up the pace at the same time. Why is he doing this? What does he want? Who is he? I thought as I started to feel my lungs burn. Then I thought of my 15-month-old daughter and ran until I could taste the blood in my mouth. He was still behind me, maybe 100 meters back, but I figured that if I tripped and fell, or ran out of energy, or fumbled with the car keys once I reached the parking lot, then I was screwed. So once I reached the sharp turn on the trail, I went off the trail and ran straight into the dark woods. I ran only a short distance and then laid down flat on my stomach, my hands searching for a rock to defend myself with if he found me. I realized that I was wearing bright running clothes with reflective strips and neon colors. I had never felt so visible in the dark before. I could hear him reach the turn, and thank God he kept on running. I started to move further into the darkness slowly and as silently as possible. My heart sank again as I soon heard rapid footsteps closing in from the trail. He had realized that I must have gone off the trail once he saw there was no sign of me ahead. He stopped and I stopped. I could imagine him listening for any sound, and I held my breath, begging a God I don't believe in to make him go away. After a while, I heard him say something in a language I didn't recognize and walk off. I didn't move. I feared that he would wait for me by the car, so I realized I had to get off the trail and onto the main road and stop someone. I couldn't go back to the parking lot. I started making my way further into the woods, knowing that I would eventually end up on the last part of the long trail and close to the main road. The lights on the trail suddenly shut off. That made me calmer at first. The dark was a comfort and protection. But then after only a few moments, the lights switched on again. This could mean that another person had just started their run, and soon I would have someone there to help me, or that he was out looking for me or getting ready to prey on another lonely runner. I decided against waiting to find out and continued my way toward the main road. It was dark, and I fell multiple times, my clothes getting wet from the damp vegetation, and I started to get cold. After what felt like a lifetime, I could see the 10-kilometer trail ahead and knew I was close to the main road. Soon I could hear the traffic. Once I made it to the road, I must have looked like I had been in a terrible accident. Blood from several small cuts from falling, my clothes dirty and my face, I assume, petrified. My bright runner's shirt soon attracted the attention of a passing car. My waving and desperate shouting made it stop. The driver, a 40-ish man with his 2 kids in the back seat, spent the next 10 minutes trying to make sense of what I tried to say between sobbing and crying. He asked if I wanted a lift back to the parking lot, and I told him no. Please take me home instead. At home, my husband insisted on going to the parking lot to retrieve the car and call the police. And report what? I asked. No crime had been committed. I just knew that he was out to get me. My husband went back for the car. The driver's seat window was smashed and my phone was gone. So was the photo of my daughter that I had had hanging from the mirror. I don't know what he was trying to do or why he chased me the way he did. But the look in his eyes, there was no doubt he had bad intentions. Creepy forest trail man. Let's never meet again. I lived in China from 2011 to 2016, and this happened in mid-2012. My friend and I decided to visit the coastal city of Qingdao for a weekend. It was only a 3-hour train ride away, and my friend, who was incredibly rich but also a mess, was personally friends with the owner of the observatory turned hostel that we liked to stay at when we visited in groups. But this time it was just the 2 of us. After a lovely day, we decided we wanted to hit the bars, but we wanted to stay away from downtown. We got in a taxi. I can speak pretty good Chinese, but my friend could not. I told the driver we wanted to go to the closest bar. I didn't care if it wasn't popular. Just take us wherever you wanted to go. As a side note, on the way to who knows where, our driver spotted this awesome fruit market. He paused the meter while we all bought fun fruits. Eventually, he took us to a random bar. It was definitely a club that wanted to be a club but wasn't quite a club. Perfect. Totally here for it. We went in and about a quarter of the tables were full. There were lots of tables. Chinese clubs often have tables instead of open dancing spaces. You just dance in between the tables. The bar itself was completely open. We took a seat at the bar and ordered a round of beer. My friend pulled out a pack of pills. She was an addict and was taking literally 12 Lunesta pills a day. She would take 6 at a time, then start drinking. Back then, you could still get the generic brand over the counter in China. Part of the reason she asked me to go with her was because I always refused to just leave her whenever she got to a state where she couldn't function. I was both eager to please and eager to party. Well, I was a dumb 20-year-old and decided that I too wanted to know what it was like to get high on Lunesta. I asked for a pill. She refused at first, saying I couldn't handle it, but I kept pestering her. Eventually, she gave me half a pill. Down the hatch it went. Suddenly, cut to black, the club was booming. There was this big guy in my face talking to me like we were in the middle of a conversation. The bartender slid over 2 shot glasses, and the guy gestured for a cheers. I cheersed and drank tequila, fade to black, and now there was nobody in the club except me, the big guy, the staff, and a couple of other stragglers. I was pretty lucid now. The big guy said he didn't know where my friend was, but he knew how to get me back to the observatory and said he could give me a ride. I accepted and got in the front of his van. We drove and drove and drove. Way longer than what our taxi driver took. I said as much, and he casually said, "Oh no, we're going back to my place. I've got some friends there who really want to meet you." And I immediately started trying to quietly find a way to escape. I noted that the door was unlocked. Good. But we were driving too fast for me to jump out, and it wasn't like people would see something bad happen and step in to help. That just doesn't happen there. So I took stock of everything I had on me and it all came together. I felt my cigarettes. I saw a 24-hour convenience store at the upcoming intersection. The light was yellow. Then it turned red. As soon as we slowed enough, I screamed, "I have to buy cigarettes." I flung the door open and ran into the store. I begged the cashiers to please call the police because there was a bad guy after me. Please, please help. But they refused and started yelling at me to get out of the store. Then the big guy walked in, saw me, and started speed walking toward me. I screamed for them to call the police again, and they kept yelling for me to get out. I ran through the store while the big guy chased me, knocking over displays in between us. Suddenly, the police came in. I sprinted over to them and got behind them and pointed to the big guy. "He's trying to take me, he's trying to take me." The police were confused at first, but the big guy had no explanation. They put us in separate police cars and took us both to the station. I sat in the detective's cubicle while they took the big guy into a room in the back. The detective asked for my side of the story, who I was, why I was in Qingdao, why I was in China, and needed to see my passport. I asked if I could go outside for a cigarette. He said no. I waited, and waited, and waited. My phone was dead and my cash was gone, but I still had my SLR camera. A couple of hours went by and eventually the detective came out and told me I could go. I asked, what about the big guy? He said that he gave them a fake ID and that they found out he's actually from Hong Kong. He refused to say why he was in Qingdao when he was supposed to be in another city and refused to say where he was currently staying. They were holding him for more questioning. I told the police my phone was dead, and I didn't have any money for a taxi, but they told me, oh well. Eventually, I found a taxi driver who sympathized with my story and traded me a ride to the hostel for a cigarette. I got to our room, but it was locked. I didn't have a key. My friend had the only one. It took literally 10 minutes of banging on the door for my friend to wake up, unlock the door, then go back to bed. Honestly, I was just glad she was safe. So, to both the big guy and Lunesta, let's never meet again.